Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our seminar. This marks the continuation of an amazing partnership between Catalyst Collective and Ivy Scholars, which helps high school students build candidacy and apply to college. I am thrilled and want to thank Joe for inviting us. It is a pleasure to be a member of this community, and I'm hoping the advice I have for you today can help you help the high schoolers in your life get the best education possible. This is the fifth in a series of monthly seminars to prepare both mentorship communities to teach 12 to 18-year-olds about critical topics in higher education. I want to talk about what we're covering today. So let's go over our journey. We've got to talk about curriculum plans for both high school and college. How do you pick the right courses? The rules for a strong start in high school and in college are very different from each other. I want to clarify that for you so you make the right decisions at the start. I also want to talk about what happens after you've been accepted to college. We'll touch on picking the best one as well as your other options. If you're not quite ready, maybe you'll want to defer or take a gap year. We'll talk about how that works. Finally, we're going to go through some financial aid and summer program tips and then end with some really important information I hope everyone pays attention to. Ivy Scholars is offering a scholarship of over $20,000 in value for one student from Catalyst Collective. We'd like your help identifying the most promising young person who could benefit from our college counseling, who we can help get a great education. Now, before I jump into the content of today, I wanted to briefly introduce us. My name is Sasha Cha. I'm our CEO at Ivy Scholars. I lead a company of 20 mentors working with a few hundred students per year. We've helped about 3,500 students since I founded the company almost 9 years ago after graduating from the Johns Hopkins University. Over 90% of one of those students were accepted to one of their reach schools, and 100% made it to their target schools. 10% of our revenue goes to our nonprofit Laurel Scholars, which works with low-income students from Texas, California, New York, and New Jersey, as well as refugees from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Ukraine. On a personal level, I love helping children find a path to awaken their intellectual vitality and leadership characteristics, then demonstrate those in college applications. It's our job at Ivy Scholars to take everything I've discussed in this presentation, combine it with expert mentorship and project management, and mentor high school students to create amazing stories to tell when they apply to college. So let's jump right in. Guys, let's talk about the very beginning. When your middle schoolers transition to high school, what do? Here's where we'll start. All high schools have graduation requirements that form the core of what their graduates need to be an educated citizen. These are mostly the same across the US. I've given you a good projection of general requirements in Texas up on the screen. What's important to know, students are expected to go beyond merely meeting these requirements and taking the classes. These classes only account for about 60% of all the classes a student will take in high school. The other 40% are up to you and your child, and it's important to be proactive and make a course plan, including the other courses you want to take. So you're required to take 4 years of English and 4 years of mathematics, which will be pretty simple. You're recommended to take 3 years of science and social studies, and I often recommend students to take a 4th year, either an AP, honors, or IB level science, or a social studies course. Students in the state of Texas also have to take health and physical education. They're also required to take a visual, performing, applied arts, some kind of fine art credit to show their sensitivity toward the arts, as well as at least 2 years of a language other than English, 1 technology credit, and 3 elective credits. This can sound like a lot, but it's not really. In fact, if you were to take a full course load, this would only reach until about a third of the way through 11th grade. That rest of a high school education, those credits aren't required for graduation. They're your chance to take more interesting, enriching courses. And I want to do a little explaining of what those options are. In general, my advice is for students to pick interesting classes that help them narrow down their major, especially for STEM majors that require students to start preparing early. It's also important for students to gauge the level of work they can healthily balance, especially when it comes to honors, AP, gifted and talented, IB courses. Those kind of coursework, they demand a really rigorous approach to academics. It's not right for everyone, but for the students who thrive in that kind of pressure, there's bright opportunities when it comes to college admission. So let's talk about the utility of a high school curricula when it comes to the college admissions process. Now, you can tell from the red box right above, no surprise, every college cares about your grades. Now, notice I've highlighted 3 boxes instead of 1. In addition to your high school grades, it's also the strength of your curriculum that matters. So, in addition to getting high grades, I recommend students take the curriculum that they feel is challenging for them, but not so challenging it's going to cause them to drop a letter grade. While there's a truism that it's often better to make a B in an honors class than an A in a normal class, I think for any other grade, especially as one might approach C's and D's, it's important to keep your GPA high before you start seeking out more rigorous courses. But for students who do have a strong GPA average, especially 3.9s or 4.0s, taking those honors AP IB courses can be a major differentiator when it comes to establishing you as a serious candidate for college admissions. Everything else pales in comparison. Even really important stuff when it comes to essays, counselor recommendations, teacher recommendations, extracurricular activities, SATs or ACT scores. All of these things can help get you into college, but if you don't have a strong foundation of grades, they're not going to work. Now, I've mentioned a few different types of courses, and I want to take a second to clarify those. When we talk about rigorous courses, the simplest designations are honors or GT, meaning gifted and talented. These are systems that are used all over the state of Texas, and they're pretty familiar to everyone. They're the more challenging versions of courses. Now, there's a few other forms of coursework you should be aware of. One's AP, Advanced Placement. It comes through College Board, the same organization that created the SAT. The job of advanced placement classes is to help you get college credit for courses that you later take. IB stands for International Baccalaureate. You'll find it in some specialized schools, mostly international schools. For example, in Houston, you'll see it in the Village School and the Auty International School. The International Baccalaureate curriculum is designed to be interchangeable with top education systems in high schools all over the world, whether you're in Europe, Asia, Africa, North America, South America. The IB system is well received by universities across all continents. In contrast, dual credit is a similar system. It does grant college credit, but it's much smaller. Generally, it occurs in collaboration between a high school and a Texas university. Dual credit courses will let you get both credit for high school and credit for a Texas university, but those credits tend not to transfer outside of the state of Texas. If you think you might be an out-of-state university student, consider AP or IB above dual credit, because those credits won't transfer very easily. Now, as you're picking your courses, it's important to understand which courses are the hardest and which are the easiest. I've given you a simple chart right up here to show that. At the bottom left, you've got the courses that require the least study time and of the least difficulty, like comp sci principles, or psychology, or human geography. At the top right, you've got the courses that require the most study time and have the most rigor, like physics, calculus-based electricity and magnetism, or AP chemistry. It's my recommendation students check a chart like this to make sure they're picking courses that are a fair level of rigor. It would be a bad idea to overweight yourself to either the left side or right side, top or bottom. You wouldn't want to have 9 hours of homework per day, for example, but you also wouldn't want to be taking all the easiest courses. There's a balance to strike here, and it's up to each student and their parents to figure out what the right balance is. Now, to give you a few more notes, when I talked about AP exams giving college credit, it's not quite that simple. You don't automatically get college credit for taking an AP exam. Instead, you got to take the whole course at your school and then sit for the exam that's nationally standardized national exam, just like an SAT or an ACT. If you score 1 or 2, you're out of luck. But if you can make a score of 3, 4, or 5, you're going to get college credit. So guys, when it comes to APs, it's not just sitting for the class like it might be in, say, a DC dual credit class. You've got to actually take the AP test too. Moreover, each university grants credit differently. It's important to check each university's policy for AP credits. Now, this might sound complicated, but there's a tremendous advantage to this. AP tests are $100 a pop. College classes cost way more than $100. You can probably save about 30% of your tuition by paying $1,000 and taking 10 AP tests. And with universities in Texas, public ones costing around $20,000 per year and private ones costing about 2.5 times that, that's a fantastic deal. I also want to talk about knowing which classes are important for you. It's a mistake to just take the most competitive classes. You're looking for ones that are going to fit your interest. I've got a class selection matrix that Ivy Scholars uses up here, and you'll note that for our pre-med focused students, AP Biology and Chemistry are top of the list. In contrast, AP Human Geography and World History are pretty close to the bottom. I encourage all students and their parents, when they're sitting down to create a course plan, to prioritize what's going to get you closer to the major you want, what's going to be really interesting, what are you already passionate about. These considerations, in addition to course rigor, are important. Now, that's what I've got to say about planning high school courses, but I've got a lot to say about planning the transition from high school to college. Let's get started. When it comes to matriculation, there's a couple factors to consider when you're choosing between multiple universities. The first is academics. You got to make sure this school teaches what you want to learn. The next most important for so many families is going to be cost. I put some sample costs up here. You'll note that the tuition at a local community college, for example, HCC or ACC in Houston or Austin, respectively, might only be about $14,000. A four-year public university tuition might be about 33% more, around 22,000, and you might see about 2.5 times that at a private university, like Rice or SMU. After thinking of cost, my advice to all students and their parents is head to campus, do a vibe check. Are people happy? Are they your people, the kind you're going to want to spend the next 4 years with and build a community with? If not, you might want to reconsider your choice. Lots of schools look great on paper, but they might not be right for you personally. Once you found the school that is, there's a couple other bullet points worth paying attention to: lifestyle, reputation, post-graduation requirements, even additional options like study abroad or certificate programs or an alumni network that can help you get a job afterwards. These are ancillary considerations. They're great bonuses, but only after you've picked a university that's your academic and your vibe checked off. So when it comes to matriculating specifically, you've got a clear deadline. It's May 1st. Now, most universities require you to let them know by May 1st if you plan to attend, and you'll have to pay a deposit, about $500, though this might be waived if you're receiving financial aid. Now, the exception is this year. Unfortunately, our federal government dropped the ball with FAFSA, the federal application for student aid. Because the federal government was late releasing student aid decisions, so families don't know their financial aid offers, many universities are pushing back the May 1st matriculation deadline. That's good news for any graduates this year. You've got more time to figure things out. But it wasn't great on the federal government's part. In general, financial aid for universities is not something you want to be late on. But maybe you're not ready to go to university yet. Or maybe you're the parent of a child who's not ready, and you identify a little too much with this cartoon on the right. I'm taking a year out to travel around the internet. It's funny because it keys into a common anxiety for parents. Are their kids ready to leave the nest? Most parents would say yes, but with reservations. Their children still need structure and community. Most 18-year-olds are not ready to plan out how to spend an entire year of their time outside of schools. It's your job as a parent, and our job as education consultants, to help students create clear plans that involve other institutions, review them with parents, and make sure students keep their academics sharp in a deferral year or a gap year. Now, I've got some practical advice on that note. If you're looking for ways to spend your gap year, my recommendation is split your time between work and play. Find an internship, found an organization, perform independent academic research, volunteer, but also enjoy your athletics, artistic pursuits, travel, spend some time with family. It will, after all, possibly be the last time you're living with your parents in their home. On the other hand, maybe you're in the opposite position. Maybe instead of being a student who got in but isn't sure they want to go, you'd really like to go, but you haven't yet got in. What if you're on a wait list? Well, if that's the case, the first thing you want to do is confirm your spot on the wait list. Universities want to know that you're interested. In addition to confirming that you want the spot on the wait list, you ought to send a letter of continued interest. Basically, this is a document that explains to universities what you've been doing since the time they put you on the wait list and helps them understand that you're passionate and committed about being a great fit for their campus. It's also important to have a backup plan. You should accept a place at another college because you shouldn't bet on getting off a waitlist. Always have an acceptance in your back pocket before you push for a waitlist school to accept you. This is especially important because if you look at the column second from the left, admit rate, you'll see lots of these schools have pretty low admit rates, and their waitlist admit rates are even lower. Getting into somewhere like, for example, the Johns Hopkins University is a roughly 12% admit rate. And then about half those, about 6.8% of students, might get accepted off the waitlist. So if you've got a real acceptance, even if it's from a lower ranked university like Syracuse, take it and then see if you can get off the waitlist. Don't take the risk. Finally, it's a good idea to ask your counselor to call and advocate for you at the university, but remember, you can't call yourself. Admissions offices consider that partial information. After all, you're always going to be biased on your own behalf. So it's got to be your counselor calling on behalf of you, not you. Similarly, you can only send your confirmation and letter of continued interest. You're not allowed to send other letters or emails outside of those documents. Now, if you are accepted off a waitlist, confirm your spot really quickly. Those waitlist spots might go stale in as early as 48 to 72 hours, 2 to 3 days. So make sure you lock it in and don't miss it. Similarly, if you get told no, then you need to tell the school where you accepted a place at, and you'll lose your deposit. In other words, if you put down a deposit as a safety, took a risk, and got off the waitlist, be prepared to lose that money. But on the upside, you're into the school you really wanted to go to. My final piece of advice, make sure you get a head start on housing and course selection. You don't want to be one of those waitlist students that's stuck in the last choice of housing with all the last choice courses because they were accepted latest. Now, I've got a little more to talk about here. Remember how I said course rigor was important for high school students who want to go to college? And we've got lots of evidence of that. Students who are attending top-tier universities like Ivy Leagues or Rice generally have to take some really competitive courses, AP chemistry, biology, and physics, for example, for pre-meds. But that's not true for college students who want to go to grad school. If you want to go to medical school and get your MD, or go to business school and get your MBA, your raw grades are way more important than your course curriculum. Let me explain. When you look at the chart on the right, a chart of how medical school admissions rates go way up when you've got both a good GPA and a good MCAT, you'll see the data here doesn't really pay attention to the individual nature of the courses you're taking. If you've got a good MCAT score and a GPA above 3.8, you're probably getting into med school. Similarly, even if you're the most star-spangled, awesome student, but your GPA or MCAT aren't there, you're probably not going to get in. By the numbers, a student with a 4.0 GPA might have double the admissions chance of one with a 3.0 GPA, even if they've got the same MCAT. So when it comes to getting into college, course rigor matters a lot. When it comes to getting out of college and into grad school, not so much. So when it comes to planning out your college experience, here's my recommendations. Figure out when you need to choose a major and what courses are required for that major. And if you're not sure you're going to stick with that major, figure out how easy it is to add, drop, change your major, shift to a minor. Once you're done, make sure you figured out the kinds of courses that are going to help you get good grades. It's more important at a university level to make sure you're taking those courses than to take the courses you find most challenging or interesting, because admission to post-university options is based mostly on raw grades and not on course rigor. So I hope that's some helpful information about planning the academic side of your education. We've got a lot more to talk about. The next thing I want to do is walk you through how financial aid works. I've got two big sections here. One's more about the theory and one's more about the practice. Let's start with the theory. So everyone knows college has gotten increasingly expensive and financial aid exists to bridge the gap. I'm going to introduce some vocab terms: need-based versus merit-based aid. Need-based being based purely on financial status, merit-based being based purely on accomplishment, as well as aid that straddles the gap, that takes both factors into consideration. I also want to make everyone in the audience aware of grants, that is free money that you don't have to pay back, work study programs, programs that give you a cushy, fun university job where you get to keep up your studies and pay you for it, federal loans, loans directly from the US government, and private loans, loans from different banks. We're going to discuss the implications of all of these forms of aid now. Need-based aid is based on family income. Merit-based aid is generally based on grades or test scores, purely quantitative measures. But there are times you can receive merit aid based on essays, a resume, or an interview. In general, most students will automatically be considered for some need-based and some merit-based aid at their universities, but it's always important to search each university's individual policies to see if there's more options for you. Now, in the form those options take, you're hoping for grants that don't have to be repaid. Loans, unlike grants, have to be repaid and accrue interest, so you must repay more than the total amount you received earlier on. Now, the good news is lots of federally subsidized loans, the ones that come from the government, they're much lower interest rate, about 3%. Still, if you can get it, I'd go for a Pell Grant first. Need-based aid that gives up to $5,000 to $10,000 of free money to students who are attending university based purely on family income. The state of Texas also has Texas grants that resemble FAFSA and Pell Grants, but are localized to our state. Now, my advice here is to fill out both FAFSA and the CSS profile. I'm going to go through both of those in the next section so you know exactly what to do to get these grants. One last point to make. Remember when I said federal loans have about a 3% interest rate? Well, that's a good deal. Honestly, it's too good of a deal. It's almost as good as a pretty competitive financial product like a mortgage. But unlike a mortgage, there's really no reason for the federal government to give you such a low interest rate on a federal loan. After all, it's not secured by something like real property. Instead, federal loans are a program by our government to increase educational investment. They might be bad financial products for the financial institution granting them, but the federal government is happy to take that hit because it wants an educated citizen base. That 3% interest rate is some of the lowest interest rate you can get outside of a really competitive mortgage. They can also be paused or forgiven. So students who decide to go to grad school or who get sick or who have trouble finding a job, they've got options. Now, in contrast, private loans are administered by private entities like banks. They're not your friends. Their job is to make money. In general, their interest rates will have double digits. I advise all students to be suspicious of private loans. They should really be your last resort. They're going to cost you more, and the institutions that offer them will often be less flexible in payment terms. If you need to delay or change payment structure, they might not say yes, or they might charge you even more. Finally, they often begin to accrue interest immediately, meaning unlike federal loans, where you don't start having to pay them back until you've graduated, you might be on the hook for some money even while you're still in college. So my advice, stick to federal loans whenever possible, stay away from private loans when possible. Now, this is some good theoretical advice, but how do you actually do this? I want to talk about the practice of financial aid and scholarships. Let's get through FAFSA as well as CSS coming up next. FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It plugs directly into the federal government. It uses parents' tax status, like income, excluding retirement accounts, primary home equity, to determine how much money students need to be able to attend university. The most common result of a FAFSA application is a Pell Grant. The second most common application is a work-study grant. Pell Grants are free money, about $5,000 to $10,000. Work-study is highly variable, and it does involve some mild labor, but it's easier than any other job you get as a university student, and it tends to be fun and involve you in the campus community. Now, my advice to all parents is to fill out FAFSA. I think every year I meet a couple parents who say, I feel like my family might earn too much. I don't want to give my information away. And my advice is this. All this information will be accessible to the federal government already. You file these tax returns with the IRS. But if you show those tax returns that you showed to the IRS to FAFSA, they might give you $5,000 to $10,000. They might only give you $2,000 to $3,000. And even if they don't give you anything, FAFSA still offer a requirement for private sources of aid, including merit-based aid that has nothing to do with family income. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is no reason not to do FAFSA. Now, the next portal, before I get on to the next thing, the federal government made a mistake this year. FAFSA has been delayed. It is still being processed. The good news is the form has been revamped and it's very easy to get it in. The bad news is that there's probably going to be some students this year who are getting their financial aid offers uncomfortably late. But if you haven't filled out FAFSA yet, that delay works in your favor. You can fill it out today and not have lost any aid or any opportunities for you and your child. Now, that's what I'm going to say about federal aid. Let's talk about private aid. The CSS profile for the College Scholarship Service is used by private universities to determine eligibility for aid. It's run by College Board, the same organization that runs the SAT and the AP tests. It requires a little more information than FAFSA, and it's pretty cheap. It's free if your family income is less than 6 figures. If it's over $100,000, then you only have to pay $16 per school. Totally worth it. Now, these are the forms of aid you can get, but I want to talk about how universities see these. The vast majority of colleges, that blue slice of the pie, are need aware. They consider your ability to pay for university when they make admissions decisions, and they're less likely to admit students who are going to need financial aid. They are more incentivized to admit students who don't need financial aid. Now, this policy happens irrespective of if a school is full need or not. Full need schools will meet the need of any student they accept. But if it's a full need-aware school, well, it's going to choose whether or not it wants to accept you with the knowledge in mind that it's going to have to pay for your tuition. Now, you see that narrow little slice up top that says need blind? Top universities, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, Dartmouth, MIT, admit students blind to their need to pay, irrespective of your family's financial status or how much tuition you can make, or sorry, how much tuition you can pay. These universities will consider your admission solely on the basis of academic merit. They also tend to be full need schools. So if you're a good enough student to get into Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Brown or Dartmouth or MIT, you're going to be able to go. The schools are going to be able to pay your way, even if your family income is critically low, below the poverty line. These schools that are both need blind and full need will admit you and pay for all the tuition you need in order to be able to attend. Unfortunately, guys, that's only 2.3% of the schools in the US. There's one more form of aid I think is really important for everyone to know about. It's called institutional aid. It's kind of the third layer after you go to FAFSA for the federal government and then CSS for state and private grants. You can look to the university and ask them how much financial aid they can give you. Now, many top-tier schools cost $80,000 a year, so this is an important financial question for the vast majority of Americans. The way universities calculate how much aid you're going to get is through a metric called the EFC, Expected Family Contribution. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions, all the data from FAFSA and CSS, plus lots of other stuff, your business and real estate equity, money in trusts, the assets of close family members, any forms of unconventional investments like cryptocurrency. After assessing the value of all these forms of capital, they're going to give you an answer as to how much they can pay for and how much you're going to have to pay yourself. Now, this happens on a university by university basis, and each university has their own set of rules. The bad news is there's no consistent answer to how much aid can I expect from every university. The good news is you've got a bunch of shots, and it's really worth it to take them. Filling out an EFC online only takes about 10 minutes, and every university financial aid website has them. They're great starting points. You can benchmark about how much you're going to need to pay for your child's education, but keep in mind they're not legally binding. They're just estimates. They also don't take account of cost of living. So if your child's moving somewhere like, say, California or even Austin with comparatively higher housing prices, you got to consider the cost of room and board in addition to the raw tuition of university. Realistically, EFCs leave most upper middle class families paying about 30 to 70%, and most middle and working class families paying somewhere between 10 to 35%. Now, that's how you get institutional aid. Most of that's about need. Let's talk a little bit about merit. Flagship public universities that want to improve their US News and World Report rankings, the rankings of all colleges that I bet you've heard of somewhere, they give generous merit aid to attract top students. For example, UT Austin can be very generous with its merit aid, and UT Dallas, UT San Antonio, who are a little more desperate for top-tier students who would probably rather go to UT Austin, they're even more willing to play ball. Now, some private universities, like UAlabama or College of the Ozarks, they award merit aid as well in a system they call enrollment management. Basically, they pick students they want, and they offer them money so those students are most likely to accept. When it comes to where you get these merit scholarships from, I've got a few pieces of advice. One is independent scholarships are small, but $500 here, $1,000 there adds up a lot. And for the amount of time you've got to put in, writing one essay, sitting for an interview, and sending in a resume, it's worth your time to apply. My advice is to check large online aggregators like FastWeb or scholarships.org. A lot of these sites can help you find a bunch of scholarship opportunities fast, and then it's your job to filter out which ones are going to be the right fit for you. I also recommend studentaid.gov and scholarshipsamerica.org. Both of these are great free sites that don't take your money, and you might leave them with more than you thought. When it comes to qualifying for merit-based aid, let's go through some of the criteria that lead students to get it. No surprise, the higher your GPA, the more likely you are to get merit aid at both public and private institutions. Your chances for merit-based aid go up radically with grades. When it comes to the SATs, there's a positive correlation there as well, but it's even more pronounced in private schools because SATs affect private school rankings much more than public school rankings. So if you're one of those students who's a great test taker, consider private universities for your merit aid possibilities. They may be more willing to play ball than public schools. Merit grants are also correlated with academic rigor. Remember when I talked about AP, dual credit, honors, GT, college level courses? There's a significant delta in students who take more advanced courses, especially STEM courses like math, physics, biology, chemistry, and students who receive more financial aid. Finally, there's some correlation between ethnicity and merit-based aid. In general, Caucasian American students are the most likely to get merit-based grants. After that, the other three ethnic groups listed in this chart are roughly equal in terms of probability. Finally, there's one note here, and it may make you chuckle a little bit. Students whose families make $100,000 or more are almost twice as likely to receive an institutional merit grant than students whose families make less than $50,000. Now, there's something that seems backwards about this. After all, shouldn't it be the students whose families have less who get more aid? And that is the way need-based aid works. But merit aid is on the basis of accomplishments. And it tends to be the case that students coming from families with more resources are able to accomplish more. When it comes to merit aid, unlike need-based aid, there's a lot that can be done, and parents who have the focus, time, and resources to help their child apply for merit-based aid generally see a greater return on their investment. So let me tell you how to use all this information. When it comes to a great strategy for merit aid, especially if you're a mid to high income family, somewhere on the top of this chart between $100,000 and $200,000 per year. My advice is this. You can bargain with small private universities. They're often willing to incentivize good students to attend with scholarships. You've got to take what you can get with large public universities. They like students, especially students with good GPAs, but they're not going to be super flexible. Something like a UT system just can't make a deal with you the same way a small private school could. And when it comes to big, prestigious private universities, especially the top tier like all the Ivies, don't expect merit aid. Universities like Harvard or Princeton don't need to incentivize top students to come there with merit aid. That's where top students would go already. But if you are going for a top school, I've got one more piece of advice for you. It's about something called honors colleges. Honors colleges are an incredible opportunity in which you're in a special group within the university you're attending, a cohort of elite academic students who are working hard, studying together, and receiving mentorship from the same professors. In general, these are even more competitive to get into than the university in question, but they lead to scholarships, fundings for study abroad and research, and the kind of community and cohort that helps a lot of students thrive. My recommendation, in general, is to help students apply to honors colleges whenever possible. You've got nothing to lose. You never decrease your chance of acceptance to a normal level of a university by applying to an honors level of a university. And the upside is significant. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my own little contribution to financial aid here. Ivy Scholars has created a $20,000 value scholarship in which one member of Catalyst Collective will receive 4 years of 1 hour per month of college admissions counseling from August 2024 until August before their senior year, and then 2 hours per month of college admissions coaching from September to March of their senior year. This is open to all students, freshmen through seniors. The deadline to apply is the end of July, and we're going to render final decisions August 16th. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, I strongly encourage you, please either share this link over here at the left side of the screen, or scan this QR code right behind where I just was. I'm going to give everyone a second. If anyone knows a bright young person involved with Catalyst Collective, someone who's got a lot of potential, someone who's an underdog you're really rooting for, but they don't have the resources to hire college counseling, and they might not get the best education without that help, we want to help them. Please take a second to scan that QR code, make a note, take a picture for later, and let's see if you can't help a young person have a radically different life. Now, I've gotten a few questions, and I do want to answer them, but before I do, I've got to talk to you about the summertime blues. Let's talk about summer programs. Summer programs are a great opportunity for students to grow and demonstrate to universities that they are serious academically and socially. Some obvious options. You can work to save money for college expenses. You can start a research project, researching something either solo or alongside a professor or research group aligned with the university. You can intern at an organization, volunteer. You might also want to build up an organization you started, a kind of legacy project, so that When you leave your high school and new freshmen come in, they're prepared to follow in your footsteps. Or, of course, you could travel, try something new, lots of fun stuff. But a little more on that last note about a legacy project. My recommendation for everyone's final semester, beyond maintaining your course schedule and not trying to do anything funny like drop courses, is to consider legacy projects. Create a chart of everything you've learned, all the systems, all the spreadsheets, all the documents, all the emails, all the conversations. Make sure all the knowledge you gained in the process of competing in your extracurriculars, the challenges you faced in leadership, the things you learned, all of those survive. So that even after you've left the school and moved on to college, future students in your school can benefit from your wisdom. I think this is probably the noblest and coolest way to spend the last part of your high school experience. But let's talk about reality. Lots of students catch senioritis. And in some ways, this is inevitable. High school is hard work, and I can't blame students who are already accepted to university to make a conscious decision to incorporate more rest and recreation, but I urge them not to let go of their self-control. If you switch more than one class in your final semester, you'll prompt review by admissions officers, especially if it's a hard to an easy class, like switching out calculus for flower arranging. Similarly, if you drop from an A to a B once, no one's going to make a big deal. But if you drop more than one letter grade, like an A to a C or a B to a D, it'll raise eyebrows, and it might lead to reconsidering your acceptance. Finally, crime, cheating, or mistakes on social media can also get admissions rescinded. If there's pictures of you that might show you involved in drinking or partying, it's important to make sure those aren't put on social media because college admissions officers will be looking. So my recommendation instead, find some extracurriculars, make sure you leave students who are graduating your advice so that the next generation can take up the reins, and try and enjoy yourself. You're only young once. When it comes to making the most of your summer specifically, in addition to finding things like working at local businesses, volunteering in your community, performing independent research, I like to advise students that these summer programs, they carry more weight with universities. If you look at the chart on the right, you'll see there's a clear correlation between improved academic performance, both in math and verbal sections of the SAT, and participation in summer enrichment programs like Duke Tip. Those programs give universities confidence that you like learning, even when you're not legally required to be in school. In terms of a timeline, here's my advice. Summer program apps open up November through December. Applications are due January through March. Decisions come out March through May. And May through August is when the programs take place. Now, to disappear on you for one more second, there's still hope. If you haven't applied to summer programs yet, I encourage you to get started. You've got over a month before deadlines close. That's more than enough time to write your essays, get your rec letters, put everything together, and make sure that you've got something worthwhile to do this summer. So if you are going to do that, here's my advice. Find programs that personally fit your strategic goals, that also match your geographic needs. If they're not around you in the state of Texas, you might need to travel and arrange for housing. You'll also want to figure out if they are residential or commuter programs, if you live there, or if you travel from there to home and back. You'll want to figure out if they grant coursework credit, which is to say, if you're able to receive high school or college credit for the work you do, as well as their admissions rates, how competitive the programs are, and their application requirements. When I talk about application requirements, there's a lot to jump into here. So before I go into those, a quick note. Program date, length, hours, time commitment, cost, those are all straightforward. But when you're looking for the right program for you, when you're trying to make a great application, here's what you're going to need. Every program will require an application form. Most will want essays, most will want unofficial transcripts, and some might want official transcripts, the ones that come directly from your school that are notarized by your registrar. Some will want your resume and even letters of recommendation. Most will settle for one, but some of the more selective ones will require two. A few are even going to require standardized tests, like an SAT or an ACT, or an interview. Most of these processes occur online nowadays. Your goal when you're picking a program like this is to produce concrete evidence of achievement, that the time you invested in this summer program gave you something that you can measure and put on a college application to show how serious of a student you are. When it comes to affording summer programs, you'll want to take into account not just the cost of the program itself, but also accommodation and travel. Some of these programs have financial aid, and that's great, but that's always a first come, first served basis. So if you think that might be relevant for your family this year, make a note and call them tomorrow on Monday. I've had a lot to share here, and honestly, I wouldn't blame you if the information felt a little bit overwhelming. I put a QR code up on the screen that's going to lead you to an Ivy Scholars website that describes everything I've been talking about. It'll help you navigate the challenges of applying to summer programs and figure out how you want to approach both this year's summer as well as future summers. So that being said about summers, I'd like to talk a little bit more about research. Research is the peak of academia. Unlike high schools, where your teachers' jobs are to teach, most professors' jobs are to do research at the universities that hire them. Teaching is kind of like a side gig for them. Top colleges, Yale, Columbia, Brown, Harvard, encourage and sometimes even have a special section for applicants to submit the research they've done. And students who do research, especially good research that's published in a journal that's prestigious, that's noteworthy, they have a big advantage in the admissions process. So here's places you can publish to help top universities see the academic merit you have. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a bunch of different journals. And on the right-hand side of the screen, I've got a list of the subject areas each of those journals deals with. Now, what I want you to note here is that it's not just a scientific process. I think lots of students think of research as something involving test tubes and Bunsen burners, maybe like a chemistry class. But the truth is, research is part of economics, social studies, history, business, psychology, neuroscience, engineering, even humanities like poetry and prose. Students who've got extraordinary abilities in any of these areas ought to check out one of these opportunities. I think these research journals can help students find a really fantastic way to represent their intellectual vitality and show universities that they've got the right stuff to be admitted. Now, picking the right journal is a matter of finding an impact factor. In other words, how much of an impact that journal has on the rest of the scientific or research community. An impact factor is a measure of how many people cite the research in the journal. It's important students publish in journals that get cited sometimes. If no other scientists are talking about the work, it must not be very good work. On the other hand, students want to avoid trying to get into journals that that are cited thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of times per year. Those will be so competitive, they'll probably be edged out by professional researchers. My advice is to look for an impact factor between 3 and 7. That's generally a sweet spot for students. I like helping students keep research simple, so I've devised a really simple set of steps that helps Ivy Scholar students complete research programs effectively. They find a good question, something nobody's been asked before that's narrow enough to investigate. They gather data, both reading other people's research as well as looking over hard numbers, either from others' research or publicly available data sets. This step helps them get an understanding of what research is like in the field, what the data is currently pointing to, and helps frame their question in a meaningful way. Once you've got your question and your data, it's time for the analysis phase. You've got to determine what the data you gathered means in relation to your question. Once you've got an answer, your job's not done. The last part of all research is presentation, sharing your results with others to add to the store of global knowledge. Publishing in the journals above or at a conference in any of the universities around the US is a great way to show that your research is serious and meaningful and qualifies you for the kind of schools you want to go to. So all this might sound pretty hard, and Ivy Scholar's job is to make that easier. Our job is to connect you with expert research mentors who are PhD subject matter experts in their field, help you find someone in that field of interest who's got publication experience, who can help you navigate the resources available in terms of external publications as well as research materials, come up with an idea, source your data, validate it, figure out where you're going to publish, perform the analysis, write the exposition, and make sure your paper is good prose, and then submit it and make sure it's in shape for journals to accept. Ivy Scholar's job is to make sure we can satisfy any research interests, whether that's computer science, medicine, psychology, ecology, economics. There's no end to the amount of subjects you can research, and any kind of research is going to be helpful for you when you apply at college. I'm almost done with the points I want to make. But before I get to my Q&A, one last note on planning for college. Sign up for housing early and understand your different options. Know if you're going to be in a single room or a double, triple, quadruple. Know the square footage of the room and know how many people you're going to be sharing amenities with, like bathrooms or kitchens or kitchenettes. My second big piece of advice is to use a course catalog. Track your requirements for your major and for graduation in general, and then match up your classes to make a 4-year plan in your first freshman year. It's easy to modify plans once you've got them, but it's a lot harder to make a plan halfway through and then make sure it's all going to come together. Finally, I encourage students to join the university's online community. It's fun. You'll get to meet some people in advance so that when you're there on the first day, you know a little bit and you feel more comfortable. The next 4 years will start to feel a bit like home. Now I'm almost at the time for my Q&A, but before I do, I want to let everyone know we're having our next monthly college coaching seminar on March 24th at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's going to last 1 hour. We're going to talk about college acceptances, managing waitlists, summer applications, deferrals and gap years, and some last-minute tips on financing your education and planning out college visits. So now I've received a bunch of really great questions from the audience, and now's the time for me to first start with them. The first one I've got right here is, can my child accept one college and then cancel if they hear back from another that they'd rather attend? The answer is yes, you definitely can do that. Most universities don't like it, but they don't dislike it enough to get you in trouble. I recommend not doing this unless you're in a situation, for example, where you're waiting on a financial aid offer that'll really determine if you're able to attend a university or not. I think it's really worth calling up financial aid and admissions offices and communicating where you stand so that they're not wondering where you're going to be in their undergraduate bond. The second question is about letters of continued interest, those letters you send to universities in between submitting your application and getting off the wait list. If you're on the wait list, the kind of things you'll want to show universities are competitive victories, increases in grades, published research, leadership skills, the social good, especially volunteering work you do, the same kind of stuff that helps you be a great candidate as an undergraduate applicant, but showing that you're continuing that even after you graduated, even after you finish the college app process. Another question I wanted to go through. It's about the Ivy Scholars Scholarship. I've got a pretty comprehensive system of what we're looking for, and I'll make sure to publish that on our website so Laurel Scholar students can see exactly how the scholarship's awarded. But here's shorthand. We're looking for students who have a lot of initiative, who want to innovate, who work independently, who have already started or launched projects but need help taking them to the next level, and for students who are already performing well academically and feel balanced socially. I think if students have all these attributes, it comes together to open the possibility for someone to have a really transformative educational experience where we might be able to take them from going from a top 100 school to going to a top 20 school. My final question I wanted to answer is about what makes a summer program good. Here's my advice. You're looking for summer programs that have concrete goals that can be measured, something you can take a picture of or put a number to. I think there's a lot of enrichment programs out there where you learn stuff, and learning stuff is fun and it's a great start. But if you want to get admissions value out of your summer programs, if you want to show colleges you're serious, make sure you're doing something you can respect, something you can communicate. If it's volunteering, that might mean being able to say you served 5,000 meals to homeless elderly people. If this is an intellectual venture, it might mean being able to say that you published your research or contributed to the publication of a paper. If it's leadership, you'll want to be able to show PR, pictures, videos, a website, press mentions, any other independent confirmation, verification that what you've done is meaningful. I'm sure there's a lot more questions out there, but unfortunately, I'm almost at the end of my time for what I've got to field. So one last explanation. I encourage everyone to scan the QR code in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. This will lead you to the Ivy Scholars Scholarship link for our Laurel Scholar students. It's important that if you're recommending a student, if it's you or them submitting their application, they specify that they're from Catalyst Collective, so we know they're eligible for this scholarship in particular. It's worth a little over $20,000 and involves a ton of college admissions counseling from whenever schools start for whenever students start their high school to March of their senior year. My hope is that you, my audience members, are going to help me find that special young man or woman who can benefit from this scholarship, who can hopefully, with our help, get a great education and start changing the world. Now, that's pretty much everything I've got to say. I want to thank everyone so much for coming and remind you that Ivy Scholars is always here to help you. The QR code in the bottom left side of the screen will lead you to a link in which you can schedule a free consultation with me at ivyscholars.com to figure out how we can help your child reach their educational goals. We make a tremendous difference. If you look at the chart behind me, you'll see we generally double, triple, even sometimes quadruple your child's admissions chances. Our expertise has been well built over the last 9 years, and I'm proud to be running a ship that steers so beautifully and helps so many students get an education that'll help them be the kind of people they want to be. And that's all I've got to say for today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a wonderful remainder of your weekend.